My name is Pam Smith. I am standing here quite happily with a woman that will quickly become one of your forever friends. She will be forever known to you as the Florida chef. She will forevermore be known to you as a chef who is very focused on the best of food and the best of technique, but also very focused on the story behind the food, the story behind food and culture, the story behind what led us to this place and how food is so involved in all of it. She is not only a student of anthropology and particularly food anthropology, but she's also a teacher. And she is so involved in bringing the news, bringing the story, and at this point, bringing the story of Florida's culture as it is expressed through food. We are absolutely thrilled that she is with us. How about a huge food and wine welcome for Chef Jennifer Denlinger. Woohoo! So glad you're here.
Yes, I am too. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you could join us this Saturday, especially after what a horrendous week that we have all championed through. My name is Chef Jennifer Denlinger, and I am the Department Chair of Culinary and Hospitality at Valencia College at our brand new Poinciana campus. We have a state-of-the-art campus that managed to make it through the hurricane.
Yay.
Thank goodness.
Yes,
and,
I know. Excited about that.
I run the culinary arts program and the hospitality program there. And when I am not educating young minds, I am educating myself. I spend all of my spare time working with farmers and growers and ranchers, producers throughout the state, learning about what they do and helping them best utilize their products on the level of a chef. So I do a lot of work with the farmers and growers. They take me out into their fields. They help me understand what it takes for something to grow or something to be made, go behind the scenes, help them do the wine or process the honey, and then in return for that, I usually create recipes using their products for them that they can share with their customers and their consumers. It's a lot of fun, and it's really great. I've really learned a lot, and I greatly understand the way food is actually brought to the table these days.
And do you try, for example, we're going to be doing some beautiful beef tenderloin. Do you try to source that locally using even Florida beef and using Florida greens, Florida honey?
Yes. Most everything that I purchase is a Florida base. Most of what I actually buy, I go straight to the farm or to the rancher, and I get it straight from them because we have that relationship and I have that availability to do so. And part of my quest is to help people to understand seasonality of products and why things are what they are and why we have them when we have them. There is a very, very complex symbiotic relationship pretty much between all food that we eat, whether you believe it or not, and all crops and all ranching, everything is related to each other. And if one of them goes downhill, then all the other ones will as well.
Right.
Look at the fight with the honeybees right now is the perfect example for that.
I mean, a very scary one. It's all there is to it because, again, honeybees are not just giving us and blessing us with beautiful honey. They're such a part of agriculture because of the pollination that they do. And if they start dying off, it ends up impacting agriculture in ways we would never even think about.
Exactly. So it's all very, very important. So I'm going to get started with my demo. There's a couple different stages to the demo, and I do have to do a little bit of magic of television, but we're just going to pretend, and you guys will have some plates out for you shortly. So what I'm going to prepare for you is I'm going to stuff a Florida beef fillet with spinach and blue cheese, and that is going to be served with grilled rainbow carrots, and I actually have baby carrots for you, and to be served with fried and buttered yuca.
Wow, sounds amazing. And you have the recipe in front of you. Feel free to follow along as we're going. And please feel free to ask questions as we go.
Yes, please ask me questions.
This is very interactive. I always like to say it's the difference between us and TV Food Network, where you might see a screen and see a chef. but to be able to interact with that chef, ask questions as they're going. If you want to recreate this in your own home, what do you need to know that's going to make that essential and that very tasty difference? And as you just heard, you'll be having the dish coming out in about 15 or 20 minutes. That's also what makes this so much better than TV Food Network.
Great. So the first thing I'm going to start with is a sauce called Marchand de Vin, which translates to wine merchant. And the reason I'm starting this first because it takes a long time to get the flavors concentrated. It's very simple to do. It's going to be a reduction of a dry red wine. I have Merlot available with some shallots and some herbs, and then we add what's called demi-glace. And if we don't have demi-glace, I'll tell you the cheap method to reproduce this at home. This is a classic steak sauce. It's pairs very well with not only steaks, but you could also do it with chicken, with some of your vegetables. It tastes awesome on mashed potatoes. So what I have here is a shallot, which is a member of the onion family. If you can't find a shallot, that's fine. You can use just a little bit of onion. And we just need to cut it up a little small. It doesn't have to be perfect because at the end, it's going to be strained out of the sauce. But we want to try to cut it up just a little bit so that way the flavors can start extracting. And because we're using wine, we need to use a non-reactive saucepan. So that means a pan that's not aluminum and not copper, because the acid in the wine will cause an adverse reaction. So any type of stainless steel pan, anything that's coated with the Teflon, Kaflon, whatever now all the non-stick coatings are. It doesn't have to be a good wine. You can use a leftover wine. You know, if you have a little bit of wine left over from the night before and it's kind of gone stale a little bit, perfect.
That never happens to me.
No,
Does
well,
that happen
you know.
to you? I've heard of it. I see these little contraptions for trying to extend wine. I'm like, really? That doesn't seem to be important. I know. But you do want the wine to be drinkable. I think that's one of the
Yes.
mistakes people make is they put wine in their fridge and a year later say, oh, this calls for wine, I'll use it for cooking. But if it's not drinkable, no.
Right.
Okay.
And then to help with the flavor, we're going to add some thyme, an herb. This is fresh-ish thyme. It's a little dehydrated, but that's okay. So if you can't find the fresh thyme in the grocery store, you could use the dried thyme. You just need a small, little, tiny pinch of it. And it's okay because we're going to strain it out at the end. And then a couple bay leaves. And what we want to do is try to reduce this down by about half. If we can get a little bit more, then that's good. So just we'll let it get started for
And in
a little bit.
reducing, the water is evaporating, if you will.
The water evaporates
The
and
alcohol
the flavor
evaporates. Yeah, concentrates. Okay,
some.
great.
Okay. So next I'm going to actually work on the spinach. So the fillet is going to be stuffed with spinach and blue cheese. So if you're at your house and you don't like spinach or you don't like blue cheese, that's the beauty of cooking. You can switch things out. You could put in some mozzarella cheese. You could use goat cheese. You could use no cheese, which I don't know why you would want to put no cheese in there. And then, of course, the spinach. And
But it could be kale, it could be arugula, it could be parsley.
you could put, by all means, yes. So this is actually pretty easy to do. You could use frozen spinach as well. If you didn't have the availability for the fresh spinach, you could definitely use the frozen spinach. Just make sure you squeeze out all the extra moisture that you get from the freezing and the thawing, because that would not bind well inside.
So you would thaw it and then squeeze it
out
Yeah.
any extra liquid that's in there.
Okay.
And then we were going to add spinach, and you know that spinach decreases by about 90%.
It does.
So start with a little bit more than what you got, than what you think you're going to need.
Great.
And, you know, you could use organic spinach. It's fine. You could definitely substitute out some other greens if you needed to.
And no salt and pepper yet, but now you're adding it after it begins to saute.
Yes. So adding salt towards the beginning of a dish helps draw out some of the moisture for anything.
Okay. And it cooks really quickly.
Right.
Beautiful.
You could add some garlic to this if you wanted to, though we are going to have garlic in another portion of the dish. So it's up to you. I did not put garlic in it for our filling. The blue cheese that we have is pretty strong. It's actually pretty wonderful, but it just depends. Like if your blue cheese isn't as pungent, that maybe you want to add that little bit more.
But spinach and blue cheese is almost a match made in heaven in lots of ways.
And I will add a little bit of pepper to this.
Great. So was it your love of food that led you into culinary? Was it your search for kind of the story and the history and the provenance?
Of course. I've cooked since I was old as I can remember, and I was always in the kitchen helping. To me, it did not seem like a chore. Like some people really think that cooking is a chore. For me, it never was. And then I got a job in a restaurant, and I'm like, really? I get to do this every day?
I know. I'm getting paid for this?
Exactly.
Yes.
So we need to chill the spinach down just a little bit. Because if not, when I put my blue cheese in there, it's going to melt into a big mess.
Right.
So I'm just going to pop this into the refrigerator for just a couple minutes.
Perfect. Just to take that heat off. I like it.
The filling and your fillets could definitely be prepared in advance. So like if you're going to have a dinner party, or you could even prepare them and freeze them the way they are. And so that way at the last minute you can just quickly get things out and going.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to do the beef. So couple little known facts about Florida is that we have about 20 million people in the state right now. We have just under 1 million cows. The majority of the state actually is ranch land. And the last statistic that I saw for this, we were number 11 for beef producing, but I kind of question that statistic a little bit because most of Florida beef gets shipped out. So what happens is that we are the reproducer of the state. The calves are born and bred here, and then they get shipped to the Midwest for the feedlots. So then we go from a grass-fed beef to a corn-fed beef. And so I'm not quite sure exactly how accurate that statistic is because are they counting the beef that are from start to finish here in Florida, or is it including the cows that have been shipped off? But either way, if you're not from the area and you want to see a cow, drive about 10 minutes outside Disney property and you will find plenty of cows for you.
I'm just so happy to hear a statistic that doesn't include how many people are out of power. So that's really a beautiful thing. I like the people to cow ratio. That's a much better thing overall. And we do, I think that's an important point, that notion that they're born here, they're not always raised right to the point where they're processed.
Correct.
They're sometimes grain-fed other places.
Exactly. There are plenty of companies that do Florida beef from start to finish. Grass-fed versus grain-fed beef, there is a difference in taste. You just have to taste it and see. It's like tasting the difference between a Granny Smith apple and a Red Delicious apple. Mm-hmm. Like, they're both apples, but you can just taste that little bit of nuance in taste. Just that. So I have some beef fillets. Beef fillets come from the tenderloin of the cow, which runs down the small of the back and side of the cow. Overall, because it's so tender, is part of the reasons why it's so expensive, but it's such a small portion of what comes out the cow. That's what drives the price up. If you can't afford a fillet, that's fine. A piece of top round would work just as well for this. Now, what we're going to have to do is open up and make a pocket on the inside, and if you can't do this, your meat fabricator, your butcher, will be happy to do it for you. If you buy the fillets and just say, could you cut the pocket in here for me? It's really quite easy. You just need a sharp knife. And this is actually a knife meant for cutting meat, but if you didn't have that, trusty old paring knife works just perfectly as well.
Okay. So we've got the fillet, and those are about 5 ounce.
This is about a 4 ounce piece.
4 ounce, okay.
So what I did is I put my knife straight in, and I kind of moved it back a little bit here, and I moved it back up a little bit here, so that way I don't have a huge gaping hole. But if you put, you put your finger and you kind of created a little pocket on the inside.
Okay.
Okay.
So when these are actually grilled off and you cut into them, you get that delicious, indulgent blue cheese, spinach, and it's heavenly.
Right. And, this is a great dish to experiment with. You could add other things such as sun-dried tomatoes if you wanted to go more down the Italian route. That would be perfect as well. Okay.
Beautiful.
Put this
And
out of the
are
way.
these grass-fed fillets that we're having?
I know the purveyor of the beef, but I imagine that they are.
Okay,
'Cause
great.
I did not get that notification that it was just
Traditional grain-fed.
Right.
Okay, good. So again, I'm very passionate about grass-fed beef because when they're grazing on the grasses all the way through to processing, they have such a different. It is a taste difference, but it's also a different nutritional profile because they're getting all of the omega-3s from the grasses, which is quite lovely. So the blue cheese is in the spinach.
correct. And what I'm going to use, I have a disposable pastry bag. Best invention ever. Okay? For those of you who may not have a disposable pastry bag, you could use a regular cloth pastry bag. They're just hard to clean.
Right.
If not, you can take a zippy bag, put everything in there, seal the top of the zippy bag, cut the corner off, and you got yourself a homemade pastry bag.
Perfect. They used to be really hard to get, but we now know there's this tiny little startup company called Amazon that
Yeah.
you can get them from quite easily.
Yeah, you can get these at any restaurant supply store, bake shop. I think you can probably even get them at the stores where you buy your cake decorating supplies, like Michael's and
Right.
over in that
Yes.
cake decorating section. They're a little bit smaller than this, but it still works. So this just makes it super easy to get into the meat.
And again, all that you have in that is just the spinach, a touch of salt, a touch of pepper, and the blue cheese.
Correct. Scissors, just cut off the top. I'll put on a pic. And easy peasy. At this point, you could totally freeze these, prep these in advance, like if you wanted to have them for a dinner party, easily prepped up in advance.
And if you did freeze them, you would go ahead and fill them.
Yes.
And then
actually-
freeze them. And would you have to thaw them before you cook them, or would you take them straight from the freezer?
You would need to defrost them a little bit. You wouldn't have to do it completely. It just
Okay.
depends on how well done you like your steak.
Okay.
The more that it is frozen, the more rare it will be when you go to cook it.
Yeah, which again, I love medium rare steaks.
Right.
So for me, pulling it out of the freezer and cooking them works really well because you
Right.
get that beautiful sear on the outside, but it still stays
Right.
nice and medium rare on the inside. That's gorgeous.
So easily done, just like that. Then this, save it for your omelet if you have leftover. Great for, omelets, for other vegetable sautés.
Beautiful.
And we'll cook those in just a second.
Okay.
So our sauce here is doing pretty good.
it's cooking down.
Yep, cooking down just a little bit. We are going to do something called fried yuca. Yuca is also called cassava or manioc, and it's you've seen them in the grocery store. They sell them all the time in the grocery store. You probably don't understand what the root is. It's a great big brown root, kind of looks like a club, and it's got a thick brown skin that's covered in wax. It's always over in the tropical section of the produce store. Really great, really cheap. So cassava or yucca is actually very, very essential for most island nations in the Caribbean. They use it for all sorts of different commodities. They eat it. They use the leaves are eaten, and they also use it as part of a fuel source as well. So if you don't feel brave enough to tackle the great big cassava root, you can buy it frozen in the grocery store. This is fresh, but it looks just like this when you buy it and you pull it out and it's cleaned. To clean it, it's too thick to peel it. With a peeler, you have to almost cut it with a knife. And then a lot of times there's great big fibers in the middle, just the way the plant grows. So you got to cut those out. So you can just buy it frozen. It looks just like this. Okay, we'll get us there. And that's going to be deep fried. And we're going to toss that into some really fabulous butter. So I've got some herbs here. And you can use whatever herbs that you like. I've got thyme and some dill and some parsley. And you can use whatever fresh herbs that you have available. You could put some basil in here. Now, for me, when I have an excess of herbs, usually I can't use them all in time before they go bad, so I will take them and turn them into other things and freeze it. For example, if I have extra basil, I make pesto, put them in little containers, and I freeze it. If I have extra cilantro, I'll make chimichurri, and I'll freeze it. Depending on what type of herbs I have, usually I make herb butter, and I keep it in the freezer. And we're going to make a little bit of herb butter right now, so then I can use that herb butter on top of corn or potatoes or whatever else that I need to use it for. So whatever fresh herbs you have, I have dill and parsley. Just going to chop it up some. And to this, we're going to add a little bit of garlic. And I have fresh garlic here. And you could, if you don't have fresh garlic, you could, by all means, substitute in a little bit of garlic powder. And the stuff that you buy already in the grocery store chopped up works perfectly. And we're just going to mix this with some soft, unsalted butter. If you have salted butter, that's okay. You just would have to make sure that you control your salt at the end as well. And we're just going to use this as a tossing sauce at the end. Okay.
Nice. And your dishes are coming out or have come out, those that are on this side. Dive right in, get them while they're hot. I know many of you are taking pictures. When we get the final picture of the plate that Chef Jennifer does, we'll put it up here so you can take an Instagrammable picture at the end as well. Of course.
Okay, so some soft butter, a little bit of salt because I know it's unsalted butter.
And is that what you prefer to use, is unsalted butter?
Yes, because then I can control the amount of salt in a dish.
Okay, great.
And if I ever needed salted butter, I can always add salt to the butter. I can't take the salt out otherwise.
And it's softened, so you can really make a nice little creamy mash.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
And we're going to actually just set this aside because we're going to use it in a little bit for our yucca.
And as you said, you do a lot of these compound butters, so you would do it just like this, but you would get it into a log and into the freezer?
Right. If I have parchment paper, I kind of roll it up like a Tootsie Roll, and put that into the freezer to save it. Or depending on if I'm going to use it right away, I'll just put it into a little airtight container and put it into the freezer and hold on to it. So this has been mixed up, and we're going to let it rest for a little while down below. But you can use whatever herbs that you have that you like. I just chose these ones right here.
Great.
I'm taking a look at our reduction. So we're down by about half right now, and I'm going to turn up my heat some. And then I'm going to add some stock. If you don't have stock, you can always use broth, but you're not going to get the same results, but we can fix that. So stock is made from bones of the animals, and it has a natural gelatin in it, so it will tighten up nice. Broth is made from meat of the bones, and you won't get that same consistency. So if you at the store and you buy beef broth, We just fix that by adding a little bit of cornstarch to it.
And nowadays, you can also buy demi-glace, which is an even more concentrated
Yes.
beef stock.
It is.
Because it, too, has been cooked with the bones, has all that gelatinous capability.
Right. Now, I'm going to talk about the carrots. They're a little bit different than what you guys have. I was actually able to grill your carrots. I don't have a grill, unfortunately, up here, so I'm gonna sear them in a pan for a minute, and then we're gonna put them in the oven and try to get the same. I love grilled carrots. When I grill carrots, I usually keep the skin right on them, because the skin gets kind of crispy and black. We have tricolored carrots here. The original carrot was actually purple, and it came from the Middle East. And throughout the years, the carrots have turned into orange through different processes. So the carrots, we have the crimson carrot, which is the purple one, a regular orange carrot. We have a white carrot, and we have a yellow carrot.
Beautiful.
And usually at home, I'll just grill them. Get my grill smoking hot. And for you guys, I'm going to throw them in the oven so that way they can get nice and crispy.
So just a little olive oil with the carrots, and then the oven is going to kind of take care of the rest.
Yes.
Beautiful.
All right, so we'll give this a couple minutes.
I'm so used to seeing the kind of the rainbow baby carrots, the
Yeah.
really small ones. I love seeing these larger carrots, but yet with all the different colors.
Yep. So our sauce is going. I'm going to sear off our beef in a minute, but I think I need another saute pan,
Okay.
which is fine. So we'll talk about our cassava or our yuca, and it has been cut up some. And to deep fry it, it's pretty easy. I want to wipe off my knife here. So then we're going to go to deep fry it. And depending if your cassava has been cooked or not, sometimes if it's frozen, it's already been par-cooked, just like your French fries. When you buy French fries that are frozen, they've already been par-cooked. So all you're doing to fry them is to crisp them up. And it's okay if it's not. It just takes a little bit more time in the fryer. And I do have some here that are par-cooked for you. Oh, our sauce is looking great over there.
Looks amazing, and the aromatics coming from it are just beautiful.
All right.
Going to get you a nice saute pan that's going to go.
Could I get another saute pan, please? Yeah. Okay. All right. So what do you guys think so far?
Perfect.
All right.
Yummy.
So look, our sauce up here is to a rolling boil, and at this point, all you're going to want to do is cook it to the consistency that you want it. So if you want it real thick, if you want it real thin, it's just a classic steak sauce. And this is something that you could make in advance too, and make batches of, and put it in your freezer in small batches as well. When our sauce is done, of course, we're going to strain out all the herbs and all the shallots in there, and then we usually put a little bit of butter in there as well.
I'm going to transfer these carrots to here, and then we'll use that saute pan. We'll get these into the oven.
Of course.
Love that they've started their little browning, so that'll help
they're getting
some.
nice and brown.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great.
All right, so we're going to cook some beef, and there's all sorts of tricks about knowing when your beef is done. And I can't tell you if any of them are foolproof. All you have to do is practice. So people always say, I like my steak rare, I like my steak medium rare, or medium, or well done in any version of this. And it's fine when you're cooking 1 or 2 steaks at home, but most of the time in this industry, you don't have 1 or 2 steaks, you have a grill of like 100 steaks going at the same time. And you got orders coming and going through both of your ears at the same time. So what we do is we learn how to figure out how they're done by touching them. If you have 1 or 2 steaks, you can do it with your fingers, but we do it with a pair of tongs. It's a little bit more tricky, and you also got to realize that commercial grills burn about 1,500 degrees. So it's hot. It's a very hot process that we have to go through. So I'm going to put my steaks in here, then I'm going to show you how you can tell. I'm going to hit the outside of these real quick with a little bit of salt and pepper.
You've got some olive oil in a pan getting smoking hot.
Yes. You could do these on the grill, though you might have a little bit of your filling seep out. It's okay. So a little bit of salt and pepper onto our steaks. Don't season your steaks until the last minute because the salt will actually pull out the moisture from the meat and it changes the consistency of the meat in the long run.
And that applies to almost anything that you're trying to get a good sear on, scallops, any of it.
So I'll tell you how I know my pan is hot, and this has come from lots of experience. It's harder to see because there's a non-stick coating in here, but when your oil gets hot, the consistency of it changes and almost will start to spread out in the pan. And if I pick the pan up, it's going to look like rain coming down a window. If the pan's not hot enough, the oil's going to go much slower down the pan. Sometimes you can see little wisps of smoke coming out. But this one seems to be okay. And the rule of thumb is if you think your pan's hot, give it another 30 seconds.
Great.
So we're going to put the steaks in there. You should hear it sizzle right away. And what we want to do is just get good color on it, is what we're looking for, is good color for this. And then depending on how well you want your steak done, then we put it into the oven and we finish cooking it in the oven to whatever temperature you want. So while these are going, I've learned lots of different tricks. Basically, you got to figure it out for yourself, with your own tactile senses. So if you go like this, make an okay sign, but don't press hard. Just barely touch your fingers together and feel right here. That's rare. And then you change your fingers, you go your next finger up, that's medium rare. And then the next finger, I'm not pressing tight, I'm just barely touching them together. Okay, so that's medium well. And then if you take your pinky and your thumb and you push them together like you mean in business and touch it, that's well done, right there.
Which you kind of never want to feel with a fillet.
Yes, yes. Please don't cook your fillets well done. You'll make everybody cry.
Yes.
I've also been told lots of different ways. Like if you feel the bottom of your ear, that's medium rare, and then you work your way up, and up here is well done. But when you're in a professional kitchen, like you should not be touching your face while you're cooking. So we go by that, and then you can touch it just like this. But usually, like I said, our grills are hot, about 1,500 degrees. So we're back here, and we touch them with the tongs, and you just learn after experience how they feel like that.
And I noticed you didn't just get it in and immediately start turning it. You really let it just really start to caramelize on that one side.
Correct. So what we're looking for when we cook meat is something called the Maillard reaction, and that's the browning and caramelization of proteins. And that happens with high heat and no moisture. So the steaks were dry. I put the salt on them. If you put your salt on too early, it pulls out the moisture. You're not going to get the same reaction. And then when the food goes into the pan, you let it sit. Resist the urge to move it around. That's also what causes meat to stick in pans. Like if you put it in there and your pan's not hot, or if you try to move it right away, then that's how it kind of sticks and you don't get as pretty of a color. So just let it sit for a little while, and if you go like this and it doesn't want to move, that means it's not ready to move. It will tell you when it's ready to move. For this, get a little bit of color, maybe a couple more seconds right there, and then that will then go into the oven. If it's not cooked to the temperature that you want, put the whole pan, if possible, into the oven. If you don't have a pan that can go into the oven, just transfer it to like a little baking sheet and finish it off in the oven for just a couple minutes. Our sauce right here is looking very good. I'm looking at the consistency of the sauce, and I can tell because the bubbles have gotten smaller as we go, and it's reduced. So when we started, the sauce was up to here, and now it's down to here in the pan. And because we have all the herbs in there and all the shallots in there, you could keep the shallots in there, that's fine, if that's what you want to do. But usually we strain it out.
Because you want to have a smoother, more velvety sauce.
So actually the term that we look for is called nappe, and that means sticking to a spoon. is the professional term that we look for. Okay.
Nice.
I am going to put my steaks into the oven. So you can see they're nice and caramelized on that one side, on both sides right here.
Beautiful.
Right there. And right now it's about rare. And if that's the way you want your steak, you're the chef. That's when you cook your steak, that's the way that you want to. But for the most part, you try to go for about medium rare. That's when you get the optimal flavor out of the meat, is about medium rare. Okay.
Beautiful.
All right. So the only other thing that we have left to do is going to be to fry our yuca. Clean up the grease on the stove. So we are going to fry in a pan, which can be a little bit treacherous. So we just need to be very cautious with dropping hot things into a fryer. When it comes out of the fryer, I'm going to put it into the butter. I know that sounds kind of counterproductive, is to take something out of hot grease and then put it into soft butter. But it kind of coats it and gives it the flavor, and whatever herbs that you have in there really help out. For our sauce, we have this great little trick called Monte au beurre. Because we need more butter in our lives, always. The way the French people get really smooth, velvety sauce is that we add soft, unsalted butter, not melted.
And the sauce is quite hot, so it's just naturally melting into the sauce.
If you stir it while you do it, it emulsifies in. So it will help thicken the sauce a little bit. And it gives it kind of like an extra richness to it. Not required. Not required at all. But sometimes especially if you're doing like a little pan sauce or a little pan gravy, that helps some.
Gives a little sheen to it.
Yep. And I'm going to get everything out of the way so I can fry some yuca. And we'll be ready to go. So the carrots are close to being done. Okay.
And so because that was a stock demi-glace that you used, you didn't need to use the
cornstarch.
Cornstarch, but otherwise you would do a little cornstarch slurry with cornstarch and water.
Yes. So if you wanted to do, if your sauce wasn't thick enough, I'll show you what you would do. Is there water in here? All right. You add a little bit of water to your cornstarch. And you make it kind of a paste, and you add it to your sauce once it's fully dissolved, and you just need equal amounts of water to cornstarch. You add it to your sauce, whisk it in, and bring it to a boil. Let it boil for 30 seconds, and your sauce will be thick. Okay?
So it just binds it.
It just binds it right up.
Beautiful.
Perfect, just like that. All right, so since I'm going to fry the yuca now, make sure there's nothing on my stove. Your yuca should fry at about 350 degrees, 325 to 350 degrees, which is standard fry temperature for starches. And just need to be very careful getting it in and getting it out.
Again, if you had a little fry daddy,
A fry daddy
or one of
works
those,
perfect.
You can just lower the basket in. You lower the basket, raise the basket. It's a little less troublesome.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop right there because we're going to get a little bit of overspill here.
There is a little moisture in the yuca, so it tends to come right out.
Of course. So we're going to fry this for just a couple minutes. All you're looking for is to get kind of brown and crispy on the outside.
Nice.
And then we're going to toss it into the butter. And if you don't like the yuca, that's fine. You could also substitute in potatoes. In my opinion, yuca is a little bit sweeter than a potato. If you eat it just plain by itself, it has a little bit more of a natural sweetness, almost like a Yukon Gold potato when it comes down to it, and the consistency as well.
Beautiful.
Right. And then we have our soft butter right here.
And again, you're going to take it straight out of the oil, straight into the butter.
Yes.
Because as you said, we all need a little more butter in our lives. Yes.
And if you did not want to toss it in the butter, maybe you can't have that much dairy, you can't have that much fat. Another option would be is to do just the garlic and the herbs and a little bit of citrus juice, orange juice and a little bit of oil, almost like a mojo. And you would toss that in the yuca as well. That would be another.
Sounds delicious too.
All right, we're getting close here.
What I love about each and every one of your elements of the dish is that they all can be standalones. The fillets that are filled with the spinach, the blue cheese, the sauce, the yuca. We can just use all of them in so many ways.
You very much could. And that's one of the good things about cooking and about being a chef is that you learn how to utilize your ingredients. In my kitchens at school, I have a zero waste policy. There's not very much that we throw away, unless it's bad, of course, or if it's completely wrong. I teach my students how to fully utilize all the products. So whereas I use the parsley tops today, the parsley stems are saved for stock, or we turn them I puree them up with oil and I make parsley oil. Even when it goes down to taking the skin off of a tomato, which we need to do for several dishes, those skins are then laid out and dehydrated. And then the dehydrated gets pureed up, pulverized, and it's a seasoning.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Amongst other things. So when this comes out,
wow, that looks beautiful. And tasted really great too. Yes,
and
I can see.
if you don't want to do the fried, you could roast it and bake it, but you would definitely need to want to par cook the yuca just a little bit in advance so it doesn't take as long to get done. Make sure I have all the pieces out. One more little piece right here.
Beautiful.
And actually what I'm going to do, make sure that when you're frying you don't have young people around you trying to help, because it is a very dangerous thing to do it, and you really don't want to accidentally.
Wow. The hot yucca is almost, causing...
Kind of coats it just a little
bit. Yeah, it does.
All
It's
right.
beautiful.
So we are going to plate up our dish. Grab the carrots out and the steaks.
How about some questions? Questions of
I
what
like
you've
questions.
seen? Yeah. Yes. So you had mentioned, if I can repeat the question, when you use frozen spinach, you thaw it, and then you try to squeeze that out. Do you do the same thing when you're using fresh spinach? Do you try to get some of those juices that are released out?
In the pan, it depends. Sometimes I'll just turn up the heat a little bit and I'll cause the juices to evaporate. But if it is really soggy when it comes out of the pan, it's perfectly acceptable to kind of drain it and squeeze it just a little bit.
Just put it into a colander, press it.
Or even if you're okay with touching it, just squeeze it with your hand and just kind of squeeze out a little bit of that
After
liquid.
you've chilled it, right. Yeah,
right,
perfect.
of course.
Yes. Yes.
Is there a reason why you put the steaks in the oven instead of keeping it on the stove?
Is there a reason you put the steaks in the oven rather than keeping it on the stove?
Actually, yes. The reason why I did put it into the oven, because the oven has heat coming from all directions, from the top, the bottom, the sides. Whereas when it's in the pan, you're only getting heat from the very bottom. So by the time I would have been able to get that steak to the temperature that I wanted, it probably would have burnt or been over crispy on it. By putting it in the oven, I have heat penetrating it from all sides, and that will help keep it from getting too burnt or too crispy. But if you wanted your steak black and blue, so that means it's seared on the outside and essentially raw in the middle, keep it on the pan. If your steak was a smaller cut, you could keep it on the pan. And it's just, we had, the demo right here is 4-ounce pieces. But if you had a 6-ounce piece, you might definitely need to put it in there, because you would need it to cook all the way through, or to
Right.
that temperature that you desired.
Right. Perfect. Yes, question.
Hi.
Religiously take my steak and get it up to room temperature before cooking, but you mentioned you could partially thaw it and cook it. How would that change the cooking technique?
Keeping
So
it at
he generally lets steaks come to room temperature
Yes.
before cooking, but you mentioned partially thawing. How would that change the outcome?
And actually, it does make a big difference. It is really good to bring your steaks up to room temperature because the core internal temperature of that meat then levels out, so you can get a good sear, and the temperature all the way through will go. Unfortunately, in a professional restaurant, the health department does not like that. We have to keep them chilled, so our steaks are stayed under refrigeration until they go within 5-6 minutes before they actually get grilled or sautéed or whatever we need to do for that. By doing it partially, here again, you've decreased the internal temperature of that steak. So if you want something that's more rare, that would be perfect because it's going to cook more from the outside, and it will just take longer to cook all the way through the steak as well. Mm-hmm. Does that clarify a little bit?
But I think what she's saying is you're doing the right thing. It's just we don't get a chance in professional kitchens to quite do that. But at home, absolutely. It makes a big difference. Another question there, I thought. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Is there a way to do the yuca fries without having to deep fry? You talked about maybe roasting them.
Right. Yes, you could roast them. If you roasted them, I would recommend parboiling them just a little bit because they are so starchy that might end up being too dry. So if you parboil them for a little bit, and then when you buy them frozen in the grocery store, there's a good chance that you might find some that are parboiled anyway in the frozen section, and then just toss them in a little bit of oil, salt and pepper, and then roast them off. It would be perfect. Mm-hmm. Yuca could also be mashed like potato. You boil it in salted water, then you mash it like a potato. Mm-hmm. And that would be another option as well.
Mm-hmm. Great question. All good. Okay, so the plating is happening. The yuca with the beautiful buttered herbs. Love that.
And if you can see the steaks, they've kind of oozed out just a little bit on the side. And to me, I find that quite attractive.
Yes, beautiful.
So people can actually see that there's filling in it. And, if you wanted to do a different flavor profile, like I said, switch up the cheese. Instead of using spinach is a good binder, but you could add some sun-dried tomatoes or some sauteed onions, some brown onions in there, just play around with it. Mm-hmm. Taste it, of course, before it goes into the steak. And then if you like it, stuff it up.
Yeah, perfect.
And I need a little spoon right here. And so you can see some of the fat that's come out, which is fine. Something you can also always do is you glaze your steak just a little bit.
Beautiful.
Okay. And we have, in this case, our roasted carrots, since I was not able to fully grill them for you. If you can't, I just really like tricolored carrots, the multicolored carrots. I'm more apt to eat them when they're different colors than they are just the orange. But you could use just the orange carrots as well. If you don't have the baby carrots, you could also just get the regular, the big mammoth carrots that a lot of times you find in the grocery store. Still grill them whole and then just slice them up if you're not able to do the little baby carrots. But they're nice to see.
It's beautiful, though.
As well. And then, for our sauce,
So beautiful.
And your extra sauce can definitely be frozen. I really like Marchand de Vin on mashed potatoes. That's my weakness right there. It's just a rich, buttery wine sauce. And leftovers could also be frozen as well. Yes. In the freezer, the question was how long could you keep it frozen? For the most part, no longer than 6 months is the timeline for most anything in the freezer that's not been commercially packaged. So, when you buy frozen, if you buy like frozen French fries or anything that's been commercially packaged in an airtight container, so that it has a little bit longer shelf life. But for the most part, at 6 months, your quality is really going to deteriorate. Things like this, like I would freeze in small little, like if I, for some reason, ended up with this much left over, I would freeze it for me in small little containers, a couple ounces, and I could just pop one out. Instead of making the whole big batch of sauce from scratch, then I had like a little container that I can just add to, chicken. It tastes really great with chicken too, or with the lamb, or on potatoes, or whatever pork, whatever you happen to be doing for that day. But 6 months for about anything that you put into the freezer is about the shelf life.
Right, that old ice cube trick where you put it in the ice cube trays that no one uses anymore, but you can still buy them. But that works out great because you can freeze it, then pop them out once frozen in a Ziploc bag, and they work out really great.
What I have here, which is what you also had on the top of your plate, these are pea tendrils. So these are baby pea shoots. And now they grow them particularly because it's something that chefs use a lot of. They grow them specifically for us to cut to put on little plates. But if you let them grow, then you get the actual pea stalk, which grows the little pieces of peas. But I found these in a couple of the higher end grocery stores. They're great for garnishes, or like if you need to have like a baby salad on a plate, and a little bit of oil, a little bit of lemon juice on top of it. Works really quite well for that. And if you don't have any pea tendrils, just some nice chopped parsley, some chopped chives would be also very pretty on this, or some basil. You had all those herbs that you put into your dish, so there's no reason if you can save 1 or 2 little sprigs of that and use that for garnish on your plate.
No, I love the peas and carrots, right? That's absolutely beautiful. How about a huge thank you? Chef Jennifer Denlinger, so awesome. You put a card on the table. That's for Florida Chef.
Yes, so with all my adventures, as I like to call them, as I go out and I visit farms and ranches and wineries, distilleries, pretty much anybody who will work with me, I upload content onto my webpage. A little far behind. I'm playing a little bit of catch up right now, but you can see I've been all over the state visiting beef ranches, all sorts of different farmers, and that's just a little advertisement for that. I have hundreds and hundreds of recipes on there, from everything from cocktails that use the produce that they give me to the entrees. And a lot of times it's a challenge. One of my favorite farmers in the entire world, Hank Scott from Long and Scott Farms in Zellwood, he grows the patented Florida sweet corn. He's got the patent for that. And he's a very intelligent man. He has utilized his farm for 12 months of the year, and he's figured out how to make it grow. And one day I was out there, and most of the times it's, okay, I'm going to go do this, and I just hop in the truck, and we just go along, and hey, you want a cabbage? And I'm like, okay, and he brings me a cabbage that's bigger than my head. It's like this, and I'm like, thank you, sir. Can't say no. And then I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to do with 50 pounds of cabbage?
Yeah.
So
you find a way.
I find ways, and then a lot of what I make actually goes back to them, because here again, cabbage is one example, but it's always peaches or blueberries or strawberries or citrus or wine or whatever it is, and they bring me stuff, or they give me things, and I return, give them the recipes. But I also know very well that if I make a whole pan of something that's cake or chocolate or anything of that like, I will eat it. So I will make the recipe and I bring it back to them. And I'm like, here you go, this is what I just made, cobbler or a cake or cookies, or, here, I just made this cocktail, why don't you try it? And we taste it. And then so I share it back with them so that they can have the experience. And then they get the recipes too, and they use the recipes in their social media marketing and other things such as that. So that's a little bit about my webpage. There's pairing guides in there for seasonality, so you can look and see if you're in the state of Florida. It's pretty seasonal for the state of Florida on there. I do have a blog called Feasting Florida, where I go around and talk about some of my adventures as I go along. I have some of the challenges on there, like I found a U-pick tomato farm, and I came home with a car full of tomatoes. I couldn't, And so there's like 100 ways to use tomatoes on there. And I did not waste anything
That's awesome.
from start to finish.
Wow.
And just little things like that, and what I've been told that I can publish from some of the stories from the farmers, what they've agreed to let me share is all on there. So my blueberry farmer sat there and told me, broke down the soil the mineral content of his soil.
More than you
Just,
ever
I mean,
wanted
like
to know.
it's
Yes,
just
I'm
incredible.
sure.
And then, and as this journey goes along, I'm seeing how every single crop, every single commodity in the state rely on each other.
That's awesome.
It's really, really eye-opening. So it's a lot of fun, but if you would like that, and I have lots of social media sites that I try very hard to keep updated, that I also post the pictures, and you'll see today's pictures up here a little bit later this afternoon. There's some cooking demonstration videos up there as well. So that's what the little flyer is.
Well, and as I said, I'll put this dish right here if you'd like to get a little photo of that. Another huge thank you to Chef Jen. Absolutely fantastic.
I'm so glad you guys came out today.
So fun. Carla represents our incredible chef team in the back.
She did great.
Huge thank you. Headed up by Chef Rob, Chef Newton. We've had an incredible team that has seated and served you, so a huge thank you to them. And our awesome audiovisual team that's brought you sights and sounds that kind of followed along as we went along. So a huge thank you to you all as well. Fantastic. We have so much going on Saturday here at the Epcot Food and Wine Festival at 1:30, right around the corner in our vineyard area. We have a forever friend of mine, Roger Gobler. He's come to us from Klein Cellars. He's going to be doing a tasting of 3 of their amazing wines. Check at the front to see if there's any tickets available for that. At 2 o'clock, right around this side on our spotlight stage, we have our Back to Basics opportunity to get up close and personal with a food or a flavor, a blend, and today it's PS flavor, which happened to be my spice blends. PS, Pam Smith, PS, don't forget the flavor. And we're going to be doing a whole focus on how to become your own artisan, doing artisanal spice blends and learning how to use them for flavor and wellness. And then at 2:30, we'll be right back up here on the culinary stage, and I will be your chef. I'm doing a Key West shrimp with a chermoula sauce, which is kind of an herb. It's almost like a Moroccan version of a chimichurri, lots of herbs, and it's with adobo. And adobo is one of the spices you're going to be tasting right over there. So at one of those, we hope to see you again. Whatever you do the rest of your day, stay safe, have an incredible time, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming, guys. It was a pleasure.